Every spring you spend money on plants that are supposed to come back. And every spring, some of them don't. It's not your soil, it's not the weather, and it's definitely not you. Here's the 15-second test that pays for itself. Flip the tag over. Find the two-word Latin name and read the second word. If it ends in biennis, that plant is built to die after year 2, no matter how big the word perennial is on the front. But some of these plants were never bred to last in normal home soil. And in the next 12 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how that system works and how to get out of it. According to the USDA's latest horticulture census, Americans spent $2.67 billion on annual bedding plants in 2024 alone. $2.67 billion on plants that don't come back. One plant sold as perennial in most garden centers across America is actually biennial. It dies after 2 years, and that's just its biology. And it's toxic enough to be genuinely dangerous to dogs, cats, and children. I'll name it in part 3. Don't skip ahead. M. If you've ever walked out of a garden center, excited, planted everything perfectly, and then watched it die the following spring, this isn't your fault. You weren't given the full picture. That changes today. Let's start with the money, because once you see these numbers, you'll understand exactly why that garden center is always so cheerful to see you back in spring. Here's the number that stopped me cold. According to the USDA's 2024 Census of Horticultural Specialties, released just this past February, Americans spent $18.3 billion on horticulture in 2024. 18 billion. But here's the part nobody talks about. Annual bedding plants alone, the plants that don't come back, accounted for 2.67 billion of that, up 19% from 2019. That's not a blip, that's a trend. For context, potted herbaceous perennials, the plants that are supposed to come back, brought in 1.36 billion. So the industry sells roughly $2 of annuals for every $1 of true perennials. 2 to 1. And those numbers don't include the labor of planting, the soil amendments, the pots, the water. Just the plants. Let's make this personal. If you spend $300 every spring on plants, that's pretty average for a home gardener. Over 10 years, that's $3,000. $3,000 that resets to zero every single March. Now here's what $3,000 looks like if you spend it differently. At $15 to $20 per native perennial, that's 150 plants. Plants that come back every single year. For the next 20 years, your garden doesn't reset. It compounds. Now, here's where I want to be precise, because I'm not here to tell you garden centers are evil. They're not. But their business model runs on repeat purchases, and annuals are the engine of that model. That's not a secret agenda, that's just retail math, and the USDA numbers back it up. The problem isn't that they're lying to you. The problem is that perennial on a plant tag means something very specific in a botanical textbook and something much looser in a commercial nursery. That gap between what the word means and what you actually get is where billions of dollars disappear every spring. So how does the label gap get created in the first place? It starts before you even set foot in the store. It starts in the catalogue. Let me show you exactly how a plant photograph can make a 2-year biennial look like a garden staple you'll have for decades. Every catalogue photograph you've ever seen of a plant was taken at peak bloom, in optimal light, in optimal conditions, often at a commercial trial garden where plants are given professional care, ideal soil, and perfect irrigation. That photograph represents the best that plant will ever look under conditions you will never replicate in your backyard. And the caption underneath, it says perennial. Size. That's not fraud. That's marketing. Every industry does it. But in gardening, the gap between catalogue perfection and year 2 reality is where the repeat purchase lives. You buy the plant, it doesn't look like the picture. You assume. You did something wrong. You go back and buy it again. Now let's talk about the word hardy. You'll see it constantly. Hardy perennial, hardy annual, hardy biennial. Here's what hardy actually means. It means the plant can survive frost. That's it. It does not mean it will come back every year. It does not mean it's low maintenance. It does not mean it will thrive in your garden. Hardy and perennial are two completely separate claims, and on most plant tags they're fused together as if they mean the same thing. So next time you see hardy perennial on a tag, mentally separate those two words. Ask yourself, perennial, according to whom? According to the botanist who named it? Or according to the catalogue writer who needed a headline? Those are very different answers, and only one of them is waiting for you in your garden in year 3. And then there's store placement. This one is fascinating. Next time you walk into a garden centre, pay attention to what's at the entrance, right at eye level, right at the door. The first thing you see. Those will almost always be annuals, bright, full bloom, maximally colourful. Because that's what draws you in. True perennials, the ones that will still be in your garden in 2035, are usually further back, less prominently displayed, often in smaller or less spectacular bloom. Because perennials are bred for longevity, not showroom drama. The plants designed to make you buy right now are always at the front. The plants designed to serve you for 20 years are in the back corner. Now that you know this, you can walk into any garden centre and immediately read the room. Front equals high margin repeat purchase. Back equals long-term value. You're not the person this layout was designed for anymore. You're the person who knows how it works. But knowing the catalogue game and the label gap, that's only half the picture. Because some plants are sold as perennials that aren't just mislabeled, they are biologically programmed to degrade. And one of them is so common, so trusted, and so toxic that it deserves its own warning. Part 3. The Blacklist. Before we go further, if you've got pets or grandkids who wander the garden, slow down for this next one. It's beautiful, but it is not a friendly guest if any part of it gets chewed or swallowed. In my garden, the little ones stay clear of this bed until I've checked every label. And quick note, this is botanical and safety education, not medical advice. If you ever think a pet or child has eaten part of a plant, call your vet or poison control right away. Plant 1 on the blacklist. The plant I've been hinting at since the first 60 seconds. Foxglove, Digitalis purpurea. Sold in most garden centres across America, almost always labelled perennial. and almost always biennial, which means year 1, it grows a rosette of leaves. Year 2, it flowers brilliantly. And then it dies. Completely. That is its entire life cycle. It was never going to come back in year 3. The label that says perennial is, botanically speaking, incorrect. But here's the part that makes this plant more than just a mislabeling issue. Foxglove contains cardiac glycosides, natural compounds that affect heart rhythm. According to the ASPCA, every part of this plant is toxic to dogs, cats, and horses. And for children, even small amounts can be dangerous. This is not a rare edge case. Foxglove is beautiful, it's dramatic, and it's everywhere. If you have pets or small children, it should not be in your garden at all. Full stop. Now, if you love foxglove and you don't have pets or children, there is a perennial foxglove that actually comes back every year. It's called Digitalis grandiflora, yellow foxglove. Same genus, completely different life cycle, true perennial. Much quieter colours, but it will still be in your garden in 10 years. Same name on the tag, very different plant. This is exactly why the Latin name matters. Plant 2, Heuchera hybrids. These are the fancy coral bells, the ones with a dramatic purple caramel or lime green leaves. Garden centres love them because they photograph beautifully. And for the first season, they look amazing. But here's what happens in zones with cold winters, which is most of America. The base of a heuchera, the woody crown where roots and stems meet, sits very close to the soil surface. When the ground freezes, water in the soil expands, and, as it expands, it physically pushes the crown upward, out of the ground. Then it thaws. The crown settles back down, but not quite as deep as before. Next freeze, same thing. Over 2 or 3 winters, the crown gets pushed above soil level entirely, exposed to air, to drying wind, to frost. And it rots. Or it desiccates. Either way, by spring of year 3, you have nothing. Now, species Heuchera, the straight native species like Heuchera americana or Heuchera villosa, have naturally deeper, more robust crowns. They've adapted to exactly these conditions over thousands of years. They handle root heaving much better. The problem is the commercial hybrids bred for showroom quality leaf colour. Breeding for drama costs something, and what it costs is root depth and cold resilience. If you want a Heuchera that look for straight species or native selection varieties rather than the named hybrids. And whatever you plant, press the crown down firmly every spring. If you see it heaving, push it back in. Add a layer of mulch around the crown, not on top of it. That single habit could extend its life by years. Plant 3. Fancy yarrow. And I want to be specific here, because plain old native yarrow, Achillea millefolium, the white wildflower that grows in fields across North America, is actually an excellent true perennial. It's tough, it self-seeds, it spreads, your grandmother probably had it, it doesn't need your help. But the named cultivars, paprika, red velvet, summer berries, anything with a colour name, those are a different story. Here's the mechanism. Named cultivars like paprika and red velvet were bred from complex crosses that include the wild white Achillea millefolium. That white pigment gene is genetically dominant. For the first season or two, the cultivar's color genetics hold. But after 2 or 3 seasons of vegetative growth, the dominant white reasserts itself. The brilliant red fades, the coral washes out. Give it 3 years and your $12 paprika yarrow will be producing white flowers. This isn't disease, it's not neglect, it's genetics, and it means you'll probably go back and buy more. These 3 plants, foxglove, heuchera hybrids, fancy yarrow, aren't anomalies. They represent a broader pattern in the commercial plant industry. Plants are bred for maximum showroom appeal, dramatic color, spectacular bloom, visual impact at point of sale. Not for garden longevity, not for your climate. Not for how the plant actually lives in real soil over real years. The breeding goals and your gardening goals are not aligned. That's worth understanding. And that plant from the very beginning of this video, the one I told you was sold as perennial, actually biennial and toxic enough to stop a heart humming. You already know. Foxglove. Digitalis purpurea. Now you know its name, you know its life cycle, and you know why it's on every shelf in every garden centre every spring. You can leave it there. But I didn't bring you here just to tell you what not to buy. The whole point of understanding the system is so you can build something better. Part 4 is the exit, the actual toolkit. 3 things you can do starting today that will permanently change how you spend money on plants. Inhale. Tool 1. The Latin name trick. Every plant has a 2-part scientific name. The first word is the genus, the plant family. The second word is the species. Here's the fast rule. If the second word contains annuus or annua, you're holding an annual. If it says biennis, biennial. 2 years and done. For everything else, it takes 15 seconds. Type the full Latin name into Google plus the words perennial or annual. You'll get a straight botanical answer. No marketing, no catalogue language, just the biology. One more layer to the Latin name trick. Look at how many words are on that tag. 2 Latin words, genus and species. You're probably looking at a species plant. Stable genetics, long-lived, close to what grew in nature. But if you see extra words, an X between 2 names, or a cultivar name in single quotes, like paprika or purple palace, that's a hybrid. And hybrids don't always behave the way the species does. This doesn't mean all hybrids are bad. It means you should ask, bred for what? Showroom season, or 20 years in the ground. Tool 2. The hybrid degradation warning signs. 3 things to look for on any plant tag before it goes in your cart. First, the letters F1. F1 means first generation hybrid, maximum vigor this season. But the genetics don't breed true, and the plant won't renew itself the same way next year. Second, PBR, plant breeders' rights. This means the variety is legally protected and commercially produced. Reliable quality, but bred for market performance. Third, the word sterile. A sterile plant produces no viable seeds. It cannot self-renew. In a perennial, that matters. In an annual, it's expected. In something sold as a garden staple, ask yourself, how does this plant persist if it can't reproduce? Now, none of these flags mean don't buy the plant. They mean buy it with open eyes. An F1 annual is a perfectly reasonable choice if you want colour this season and you know what you're getting. A PBR perennial might still outlast a cheap species plant if you manage it well. The goal isn't to avoid the entire garden centre. The goal is to stop being surprised when something doesn't come back. That surprise is what the label gap was designed to create. Now, you can see it coming. Tool 3. The Native Plant Nursery. And this is where everything we've talked about today comes together. Native plant nurseries operate on a completely different business model. Their plants are species-level or native selection varieties, not F1 commercial hybrids. Their staff talk about life cycle, not colour. Their labels include Latin names as standard. And their plants are adapted to exactly your region, your soil type, your freeze depth. They're not exotic, they're not dramatic, but they are designed by evolution, not a breeder, to thrive where you live. Here's how to find one. Open Google right now or after this video and search your state name plus native plant nursery. Or search your state plus native plant society. Most state native plant societies maintain nursery directories. 3 signs you found a good one. They sell species plants, not just named hybrids. Their labels show Latin names. And when you ask a staff member, "Is this a true perennial in my zone?" they give you a real answer, not a catalogue line. And if you want a starting list, plants that are true perennials, native across most of the US, and genuinely low maintenance once established, here are 4 you can ask for by name at any native nursery. Native coneflower, Echinacea purpurea. Black-eyed Susan, Rudbeckia hirta, may self-seed. Fills in over time. Wild bergamot, Monarda fistulosa. Pollinators love it, drought-tolerant once established. And native yarrow, Achillea millefolium. Not a named cultivar, just the straight species. White flowers, spreads by rhizome, nearly indestructible. 4 plants, 4 Latin names, all confirmed true perennials, all available at good native nurseries. Let's come back to where we started. Every spring you spend money on plants that are supposed to come back, and every spring some of them don't. Now you know why. The catalogue photograph was taken on the best possible day. The label used perennial loosely. The hybrid was bred for the shelf, not the soil. And the store layout put the short-lived plants exactly where you'd see them first. None of that was accidental. All of it was designed. And now that you can see the design, it stops working on you. 3 things to remember after today. 1. 3 plants to remove from your shopping list. Foxglove, heuchera hybrids, and fancy-named yarrow cultivars. 2. 1. Search to make this week your State Plus native plant nursery. 3. 1. Habit for every future nursery visit. Flip the tag. Find the Latin name. Google it in 15 seconds. That's the whole system. 3 things. 1 search, 15 seconds per plant. Here's your 1 action for today. Not tomorrow, today. Pick 1 plant that's currently in your garden or sitting on your porch. Just 1. Look up its Latin name. It'll be on the tag or on the pot. Type that name into Google plus the words perennial or annual. That's it. That's the whole action, 60 seconds, and you'll know for the first time with certainty whether that plant was ever designed to come back. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Are you team annual, team perennial, or team I had absolutely no idea? No wrong answers. I was team had no idea for years. That's how most of us start. The comments on this one are going to be interesting. I'll be reading. If this video changed how you'll shop for plants this spring, share it with one person who gardens. One friend, one neighbor, one family member who's ever said, "I don't know why my perennials keep dying." You'll save them a few $100s and a lot of frustration. That's worth 30 seconds of your time. Because next spring, when your garden still looks great, when the plants you chose are coming back exactly the way you planned, and your neighbor is loading their cart at the garden center again, and they look over the fence and ask what your secret is, you'll just smile. And you'll say, "I got smarter." Happy gardening, and I'll see you in the next one.